Good afternoon, everyone, and good afternoon to the media and the listening public. Everyone will recall my recent announcement that on November 1st, I will be attending the 2021 United Nations Climate Change Conference, known as COP26 in Glasgow. In case no one knows, COP means Conference of Parties, that will be held in Glasgow, Scotland. I now wish to share some very important information on our role, and I mean Bermuda's role, at this very important global event. Some of you may know that Bermuda is also chair of the United Kingdom Overseas Territories Association by way of our London office. And so, in partnership with the UK government, we, Bermuda, will be leading the associated governments at the 2021 United Nations Climate Change COP26 in Glasgow. The United Kingdom's Overseas Territories Association is the convening body for all 14 overseas territories, UK overseas territories. Under Bermuda's chairmanship, COP26 is a vital and important opportunity to showcase our work in tackling climate change in each territory and how we are protecting the unique marine and terrestrial environments within each territory. As a highlight of Bermuda's involvement in COP26, the UK Pavilion will have a Nature Day. And I, as Deputy Premier and as the leader of the Overseas Territories delegation, will lead an event entitled Our Vision for Healthy Oceans. This event will be thematically raising awareness, protecting our oceans, and how the overseas territories are taking action against climate change. Through our official presence in the UK Pavilion, I will showcase the precious and vulnerable natural environments of the overseas territories and generate high-level engagement to support our efforts to ensure adequate protection for the precious resources in each of our territories for future generations. We will engage directly with representatives of countries signed to the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, civil societies, global media, and critical stakeholders in this space. The overseas territories, including Bermuda, represent the world's 6th largest marine estate and over 90% of the UK's biodiversity. We are vital to the UK's meeting its pledge to protect 30% of the world's oceans by 2030. Governments of the overseas territories are custodians of internationally essential and crucial habitats which span the globe from the Antarctic to the Caribbean, and of course, to the North Atlantic here in Bermuda, and the Indian Ocean to the Pacific. All territories are vulnerable, and we will be among the first in line to experience the potential impact of climate change. Overseas territories governments are at the forefront of renewable energy, nature-based solutions, adaptation, resilience, ocean protection, and climate finance. Bermuda is a leader in this space. We are turning away from fossil fuels and investing in renewable energy. We are developing bans on single-use plastics on land, starting reforestation projects, moving towards electrification of transport, private and public vehicles, tackling invasive species, increasing the availability of solar power, producing a water and sewage solution, and protecting our coast. And might I add, we're also providing higher protections for endangered species as well. We are moving towards developing wind power at sea and creating a marine spatial plan to protect and manage our ocean resources. We are also ensuring sustainable fisheries and protecting endangered species while bringing ecosystems back into balance. It is clear that as a jurisdiction, Bermuda is at the forefront of climate change, environmental protection, and taking meaningful action. Bermuda's presence at COP26 will represent highly diverse demographics from small communities scattered across the globe. As the lead UK overseas territory at COP26, we will call on the international community to give attention to our efforts, showcasing our country and, of course, other countries as a forward-thinking jurisdiction at the forefront of climate change. As Bermuda's environment is a vital part of this sixth largest marine estate, we must establish Bermuda's leadership and innovation in this space. We are working to highlight Bermuda's success and innovation in climate mitigation to a high-level audience alongside our other fellow overseas territories, and also our family in the Caribbean proper as well, because they will be also at COP26, and we are part of the CARICOM family, and we also will be standing with them as well. To that end, as the international community recognize the urgency and the need to address climate change, this is crucial now more than ever. And I look forward to representing Bermuda at COP26 alongside and leading the other overseas territories delegates. There's about 6 of them. We all will be there together under the UK delegation to share our experience and our leadership. Thank you. And at this time, I welcome questions from the media.
Good afternoon. Owen Johnson Barnes with the Royal Gazette. Now, the Kroll Bond Rating Agency recently said that Bermuda lags in adopting a cohesive climate action strategy. Do you think that's a fair assessment?
No. And I would perhaps suggest that when Kroll did its assessment, they actually didn't speak to anyone in the Ministry of Home Affairs or Department of Environment and Natural Resources, so they were misinformed, in my view, of that. We have had a biodiversity action plan since the mid-2000s. We have continuously enhanced, as I've already said, a legislation around invasive species, which we recently passed, continued to put in place protections in place for endangered species, and have plans in place and are developing more enhanced plans around mitigation of climate change and environmental protection. Unfortunately, we did not have a chance within the government to have a conversation with Kroll, and they would have been better informed. And we're also venturing on right now with the support of some funding from the UK government to have a wholesale climate study for Bermuda, following on from the report that they make reference to about the coastal study, which was done in the mid-2000s. So we are entering to a much more comprehensive set of plans and studies, following on from the work that we're already doing around mitigation of climate change and ensuring environmental protection.
Now, of course, Bermuda is a very small territory, and most of the British overseas territories are also relatively small. How can Bermuda And the OTs sort of represent themselves as leaders in this area when, let's be honest, we are not the ones responsible for the vast majority of the climate change impact.
Well, I think that's two different parts. Those who are the polluters and the ones who we need to give most attention to mitigate the impact of climate change are the larger industrial nations, which are accounting for a considerable amount of the um, disruption in climate that is creating this challenge. We as small states are the ones receiving the impacts of that productivity, that activity. So where we must lead and where we're leading is in the efforts to mitigate our own situation. And of course, because we're small, perhaps our actions can be more immediate and and get more results more quickly. So we are aggressively, as our other territories, doing our best to mitigate the activity that we are being impacted by the most. Most countries in the world don't have hurricanes, don't have other disruptive activity that can essentially wipe out your economy and disrupt your whole fabric of your society. Most countries don't experience that. Some do, but of all, as you know, all the island states, particularly in the Caribbean and in the South Pacific and in other parts of the world, and particularly in the tropical zone, we're the ones receiving the impacts. So where we're leading is in the aggressive mitigation to our own situation. And because, as I've outlined, most of the world's biodiversity is actually within our hemispheres, within our territories. So we're doing our best to mitigate those impacts within our own environments. That's where we're leading. Now, where we're looking for leadership from, particularly from the larger countries, is to support that work. Because let's face it, with the impacts of the pandemic and with other sort of results of that, most small countries are having to put a considerable amount of their financial resources into dealing with the pandemic, dealing with the economic dislocation. How much can you put to environmental impacts if you have to feed your people, keep them surviving, and support your economy, and ensure social system that supports their needs in this crisis? So where we need the support of the larger industrial nations is on the financing and the resources to support our environmental mitigation. But I think if you look at all of our territories, including Bermuda, where we are aggressively dealing with that, that's where we're leading. We're leading in dealing with the issues of our fisheries, dealing with the issues of coral bleaching and the impacts on our marine environment, even clean air, and also issues around the protection of land. You know, we in Bermuda have just recently, as you know, passed legislation to provide a high level of protection of conservation land, arable land, and other areas of sensitivity, because we know we need to protect open space, we need to protect green space for the future, and not have those spaces subjected to either profit opportunity or environmental degradation or any other activity that may change with a change of government. So I'm sure, and I'm certain, if you'll see, most of our territories are fighting with these issues, and we are more aggressively dealing with them than perhaps the larger countries who we need support from.
Now, why is it important that this conference is being held in person? As a layman, you'd think that the carbon impact would probably be lower if a lot of people weren't flying there.
I think that's a good question, but perhaps that's a question you need to speak to those United Nations. But as somebody who appreciates, as a legislator and as one of the leaders of a country, that there are some things that you must do every effort to get together to address. This is perhaps the most important global crisis or situation that we're facing in this century. And so virtual meetings only have a certain amount of impact. I think that this is the opportunity for small and large countries to get into the room and look at each other and say, well, these commitments were made in 2009. around the Paris Agreement. How are we and how are you going to reach the temperature levels and the commitments that were laid in the Paris Agreement? Because right now, according to the science, as we've all seen, we're not getting there. How are we going to, over the next 20, 30 years, get there? I don't think that can be done in the same impact virtually. Although, like everybody else, I'm concerned about the issues of public health, but I think that the health of the planet in the next 20, 30 years merits us getting together to discuss these issues.
Final question. This isn't entirely in your wheelhouse, but obviously you've spoken a lot about renewable energy, and there is that solar finger project, which we're still waiting to hear more updates on. Can you tell us any more about how that project is moving along and when we might start seeing the benefits?
Well, I am awaiting a report myself from the regulatory authority on where things are at, because some of the issues related to that do relate to some, and also perhaps from the Public Works Ministry, who is a landlord, as well as to where they are to ensuring that that project is fully operational. My understanding, as when I last spoke with you, is that they are on the verge of, if not have not already completed, because some of the issues were infrastructure in nature as to certain aspects of the engineering of the project that had to be completed in relation to Belco, as well as to the operation of the actual finger project. Perhaps by the time I get the opportunity to be with you again, and I expect that I will have another press conference before I leave, which is on the 30th, that I will be able to give you some clarity onto where that project is. Because that is also a part of our effort to mitigate our environmental impact, is to move aggressively towards renewable energy as well. So I will look to see that I can bring you some sort of update on the status of the operation of the Finger project.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Do we have?
I'd like to make just a couple more points, if you don't mind, in reference to our activities in Glasgow. We're also going to make a very concerted effort to ensure that we, not only as a group of overseas territories, but also as a country, meet with certain key global players. Some of the things that the team in London and in Brussels is working on is ensuring that we meet with other NGOs and other parties who have an interest in the affairs of small island states when it comes to the environment. So the ACP group of countries, African, Caribbean, Pacific, which is chaired, and I believe the presidency is by Prime Minister Mia Mottley. We are making an effort to see if we can meet with her, because obviously African, Caribbean, and Pacific countries, we're all very much are facing the issues of climate change and how we mitigate and support ourselves with dealing with this. Also, the Alliance of Small Island States, which is another major group which has for many, many years been working in the area of climate change and biodiversity, and have been participating in this movement now for decades. So we're looking to meet with a number of different parties, NGOs in particular, who have an interest with the affairs of small island states, to talk with them, share the Bermuda story, and even solicit their support in our own efforts to deal with the issues of our marine environment. And as we formulate further strategies around our own efforts to mitigate climate change, we look forward to getting the support from other organizations as well, because we are all in this together. So there will be quite a bit of activities. My expectation is that we will update you all, if I can, daily on what we're doing in Glasgow, and also possibly in London, some other activities that will be helpful to you understanding what we're doing and what we're accomplishing while we're at the conference.
Thank you, Minister. If there are no further questions, I thank everyone for joining us here, and have a beautiful day.